Now that you know who you are, would you like to go live for her? Live as her for the first time? Knowing that living as her takes total soul, mind, and body alignment, I checked in with all of my parts. Almost immediately, my soul answered in the smallest voice, me. Almost as if to say, I am her, let me lead. Mentally, this information was the most analgesic of anything I have ever experienced. My mind, my consciousness, that was on board. I paused when I got to the body check-in. I think I'm dead. So I guess my body is not aligned, right? I didn't receive an answer the same way I was feeling the conversation in my mind. Instead, instantaneously, I re-entered my body and felt the sensation of being reborn as I took my first breath of air. It was as if I could feel every single cell in my body oxygenate. $30 trillion little miracles. Every single cell resurrected by the appropriate application of my free will. The adrenaline pulsed through me in waves as I began regaining function of my limbs. Once I was integrated enough back into my body, I immediately yelled for Jeremy to call an ambulance, and the panic started to overwhelm me. I had no idea what came next. It was such an abrupt re-entry, and it took a minute to adjust back into my world. I had to shove the mind-blowing experience of divine magic to the back seat to make sure I would stay in this earthly world. My battle was truly just beginning. I stabilized enough after the initial adrenaline dump to have Jeremy drive me to the emergency room. He helped me to the car, and after a few minutes, my right arm started tingling and went numb. I remembered stroke protocol, which I thought I could be having. I told Jeremy that if I started slurring my words or if one side of my face started drooping, to tell the ER I could be having a stroke and what my symptoms were. The numbness started from my fingertips and progressed to my shoulder in slow motion. Shortly after my right arm went numb, the same paralytic effect happened on my left. My legs followed. Tears were streaming out of the corners of my eyes while Jeremy ran inside to get hospital staff in a wheelchair. They lifted me out of the car, rolled me in via wheelchair, where I waited for 4 hours to be seen. When the nurse parked me in front of the check-in desk, she bent down and whispered, "All of the blood has rushed to your organs as part of the survival response. You should regain motion in your extremities soon." She was right, and I was so grateful for her kindness. For 4 hours, I sat in agony in the ER while the adrenaline coursed through my organs for damage control. The adrenalized blood scoured my body, and 1,000 tiny explosions went off in my head as my consciousness was rapidly processing this experience. With this much adrenaline, let me just tell you, I felt pain in and could point out each organ to you. I could have named the specific cells in pain because that's how abundant the catecholamine waterfall was. Gratefully, dopamine was one of them. Let me just say this. God was in that emergency room to witness me that day. As I slowly regained feeling in my extremities, it felt like an angel was sitting there pushing neurotransmitters to the right spots and sewing me back together while I waited helplessly in my wheelchair. Our medical system was so overwhelmed at this point in time that there were literally only beds available for those in immediate danger. I was so scared, but I knew I was in good hands if anything happened. The hospital I was at performed brain surgery on my dad before he passed away, and I knew he was with me in spirit. By the time I was finally able to be seen, I was told my labs were clear, undoubtedly from the adrenaline, and that because I was there in the ER 3 days prior, they didn't see a need to do any additional imaging that day. I was told there was virtually nothing wrong with me and discharged. When we look at what the emergency room is trained for, though, they were right. But that didn't mean that there was nothing seriously wrong with me. I wish I could say that after this visit, things improved. 3 days later, I was in the emergency room again for a third time that week, again finding nothing wrong. I received IV fluids and was told that the next step was just to wait for my colonoscopy the following week. Colonoscopy prep is a very involved process, so I had a lot of anxiety worked up. I was so excited to speak to an expert, a gastroenterologist, about everything I was feeling. This is truly what I needed. Prior to the procedure, I only made small talk with my doctor. I was too nervous for anything else. I have sexual trauma, and the idea of multiple people touching me while I was incapacitated made me want to throw up. I thought, I'll feel better about this once it's over and I get to talk to my doctor. I didn't even get to speak to my doctor after I woke up. I was met by a nurse. I asked to speak to my doctor, which they declined. He was already with another patient. They were so proud to tell me he had only been in there for 7 minutes, and that I would get a phone call if the biopsies revealed anything. They encouraged me to eat the snack provided, processed and full of added sugars, which was the exact thing that caused my candida to overgrow and caused these symptoms for me in the first place. Despite providing the lab report ordered by my dietitian to 4 different providers not affiliated with my dietitian, I was diagnosed with IBS and told to just move on. I couldn't believe that everyone I was taught to ask for help had gaslit me while I had physical evidence of a treatable illness in my hands. How could this be something that traditional medicine doesn't look at? Is all IBS and IBD preventable? Are we just not looking in the right places? I don't know the answers to those questions, but for me specifically, no, I was not looking in the right places. The gut microbiome health is foundational in dietetics, functional medicine, and naturopathic medicine, but ironically not the traditional places that a lot of us know to look. As a result of this experience, I swore off America's systems, not the amazing human beings providing care through those systems. And I turned to God instead. All 11 of my body systems were failing one after the other like dominoes, and the only eyes that could see it were the eyes of God. And that was enough. Through a series of spiritual awakenings, I met my inner healer and grounded her into my new reality with a series of calculated biohacks. I maximized my neuroplasticity and put up the fight of my life in silence for as long as I could. Keeping myself alive became another full-time job. And in December 2022, my team at my previous employer helped me to transition to emergency disability. Their support in this process undoubtedly saved my life, and I'm so grateful to have been supported in so many different ways at such a vulnerable time. On the very first day of this emergency leave, I discovered that I am autistic. This was the second best day of my life. By the following day, it felt like I had forgiven myself for almost everything buried in my subconscious. There's nothing wrong with me, I thought. I'm just autistic. I didn't need to feel bad for being me. It was just time to come out of hiding and unmask my autistic traits. By this point in my health journey, my brain fog was so bad and my cognition had declined so much that I had total amnesia of my life. I had no memories, happy or sad. I couldn't remember myself. I couldn't remember I had family and friends that loved me. And it was a total separation from everyone and everything. The news of autism shocked my system, and I went on a journey of self-discovery immediately. Without needing to report to work, I was able to fully surrender to myself. I entered the depths of my mind to begin reprocessing my life under these new conditions. Forgiveness was erupting all over my wounds and battle scars, and I found myself slipping deeper into my own madness as medical professionals kept gaslighting me. Both God and I were validating my experience, so I severed my connection to the outside world almost entirely. Feeling so empowered by my autism diagnosis, a self-diagnosis at that, I sought out the other colors of this very beautiful and vast spectrum. I discovered many neurodivergent creators, and I found solace in their stories. I onboarded my ADHD diagnosis and aligned with my ADHD family, and I felt seen fully for the first time in my life. Soon after finding my people, these wondrous communities connected the dots on all of my comorbid illnesses that were causing my near-death experiences. So many like-minded people were speaking their truths, and this allowed me to become aware of my own autism and ADHD, my fibromyalgia, my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, my complex post-traumatic stress disorder, my dysautonomia, all 3 types of POTS, a mysterious heart condition, and a functional movement disorder. Each discovery cracked me open, and I began calling my higher self, her, back home to me. Each layer brought regenerative healing, but the greatest Hail Mary of all was by far the MTHFR gene mutation. I had been psychotically stewing over the possibility of a gene mutation being a blind spot because I was unaware of my birth parents' genetic history. My research in this area, MTHFR, was extensive, and all signs pointed to this being my missing piece. I had total amnesia over my life, and every single cell in my body was deficient in what it needed to function. I was so desperate to live that I leaned into an autistic superpower I didn't know I had. Without having a provider experienced in MTHFR and genetics, I downloaded my raw DNA data from my ancestral DNA report that I had completed in summer of 2022. I loosely learned genetics enough to understand single nucleotide polymorphisms, gene mutations, and then went digging through 12,500 pages of data to try diagnosing myself. After searching the whole month of December,